Hi, so I am waiting on my co-hosts to arrive, and they should be here any minute. So I'll be right back. Hi, so I am waiting on my co-hosts to arrive, and they should be here any minute. So I'll be right back. So I am waiting on my co-hosts to arrive, and hey.
I can't see you. Are you there? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm there. I was just sending you and Rick a text message.
Oh.
Because I'm sitting here by myself, so so I don't know. Let me see if Rick. Hey, let me see.
I can't see you.
You still can't see me?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm there.
No, it's echoing. I'm not saying a word. That's when I said something before.
How about now?
No,
Can
I
you
don't
hear
hear
me?
that. Yes.
Okay. Let me turn it up a little bit.
That was a delayed echo because I'd said that a few seconds before.
It was echoing because I had the YouTube page open.
Okay.
Where it's live streaming. And so it stopped echoing because I closed that page. Let me close, let me get offline altogether.
Okay.
So yeah, so I don't know, I don't have a response yet from Rick, so I don't know what's going on.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, Rick, where are you? I'm getting on my hands, my palms are sweating. It's like, where are you, Rick? Okay.
I know, we're so used to Rick carrying the conversation.
Yes, and I, yeah.
We might have to learn. We might have to learn how to talk. But that'll be a short conversation.
Well, that's what I was going to say. That's why I texted you earlier. I'm like, ooh, the night's not the night. Rick, where are you?
Well, I told Rick last week I'm just tired of Laurie Garrett. He might have, you know what? He might have thought we were on break tonight
Yeah, that's
because
a break. Yes.
well, the thing is, we've had so many cancellations.
Yes.
And I have revised the schedule every time.
I know.
But there was a previous version that had tonight as a break.
Mine still does. I didn't take it off my day planner. And
okay,
I still
you must not have version 7, I think it is.
I probably don't. I knew we were going to be meeting tonight, but I didn't take it off my calendar, you know.
Okay.
And it's still on my calendar break.
Okay. So what it is now we have a break next week. And then we come back and we have 3 weeks left. And we'll be done with Laurie Garrett. And I'm ready to be done with Laurie Garrett.
Yeah.
And I was telling Rick this last week when you weren't here that I just I mean, you see tonight I didn't write an agenda. I didn't write any questions.
Yeah.
Or anything. And you've been in book group with me for a long time, so you know that's very unusual.
Extremely.
But it is a sign that I'm really, that she has really worn me out. And mostly for me, it's the disorganization, the repetitiveness. I think it's just a poor editing job. You know, it doesn't ever really give you any little summary statement. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what it doesn't do that. You know how most academic texts will be in like outline form with headings and subheadings, and you know you can just kind of look at those subheadings and have an idea what the main point is. She doesn't do subheadings.
No. And as soon as you open this chapter, which we already discussed earlier, and it's unusual in our other book meetings, meetings, that I haven't read the chapter, but we start out with the epidemic spreading throughout the world. And I'm like, when I started out, the AIDS epidemic, that is, spreading out through the world. And I'm like, when I opened the chapter, I was like you, I went back and read the headings, and I'm like, oh all right. Well, you didn't tell me you're going to talk about this again. So it's like, okay, so now, all right, we know it's spreading, this epidemic, and it's going from country to country. All right. So that right there kind of wore me down. It's just,
Because it's not long ago that we read 100 plus tiny print pages on
Yes,
HIV.
we did. Yes, we did. It's a very important subject. Yes, it's extremely important. But that's not what you said in your heading, because you don't have any, subheadings, and we don't do like we normally do. And when I open it up right away, I'm like, AIDS in India. Okay, well, I thought we already knew that.
Right. I thought we were talking about poverty.
Yes.
Housing, social disease.
Right.
And actually, she does get into those topics in this chapter, which I just kind of skimmed.
Right.
But the first half of it that we kind of talked about last week is focused on HIV.
Yeah.
She's using HIV as like a case study to look at poverty and how all of that intersects with disease. But since you already wrote an extensive chapter on HIV, it seems to me you could have been, let me see what Rick is saying. Oh, Rick is having a hard time dialing in.
Oh, but he's coming. Help him.
Well, let's see. He said give him 5 minutes. Tell him it's okay. We'll just be happy when you get here.
Yeah.
But the second half of the chapter, she does expand her focus a little bit,
Right.
Using TB and the measles as other kind of ways of looking at poverty. But it really kind of wears me out. Let's do our introductions while we
Okay. All
give
right.
Rick a minute. And you want to start?
Yes. My name is Venita Walker, and I am joining you from a beautiful day in the north.
Yes.
East. Yes, it was like spring. From Cromwell, Connecticut. And we're reading The Coming Plague by Laurie Garrett. This is my ticket in. Welcome.
Yeah. I've got my ticket. And I'm Logan Michelle Odom in Brooklyn, New York, where we also had a very lovely, beautiful, warm, gorgeous kind of day going on, which I really, really needed. So I'm happy about that.
Yes.
So, like I said, we have a break coming up next week. And then when we come back the following week, it's to discuss chapter 15, the entire chapter, hantaviruses in America. But the focus for tonight is chapter 14, the continuation of Thirdworldization, the interactions of poverty, poor housing, and social despair with disease. And this week's reading covers the last half of chapter 14. And here Laurie Garrett considers the ways in which poverty led to the spread of disease such as HIV/AIDS in Asia and Europe, and measles and TB in the United States. The mental health toll on healthcare workers is in under-resourced medical settings. The threat to local economies in overstressed countries, and negative attitudes towards certain populations are also considered as specific aspects of how and why diseases spread. So I thought the second half of the chapter was more interesting to me than the first, just because I'm really worn out on the HIV discussion. Mm-hmm. But I don't think she ever clearly just kind of demonstrates or shows you what I think she's trying to say is that poverty, overcrowded housing conditions, and people just being overstressed. Because of those kinds of things, microbes end up, having their way with us. They end up spreading. And I think what she's trying to do is show how different countries have reacted to the start of certain diseases. And depending on how poor they were, or depending on what their attitudes were. So, for example, in the United States, it wasn't about poverty. The reaction to HIV wasn't about poverty. It was about attitudes toward the people that were getting HIV. And so because of those attitudes, the disease is allowed to spread. but she just doesn't do a good job of tying all that together and making it clear what the point. Nowhere did I see a definition for third worldization, you know. So you're kind of figuring out through this very dense text what it is she even means by that term, which I guess I don't know. I don't know. I guess what really she means by the term is how a country can become even more impoverished when it has to take on additional unplanned for healthcare expense.
Right.
But I did think the second half of the chapter was more interesting than the first half.
If you don't lose the reader
right
in the first half, that's the struggle.
Right.
Okay. To be honest with you. And of course, this week was just absolutely crazy and pressed for time, which was very little of it. And okay, let's get it on. So we can get a flow. And the thing is, you can lose the reader because you don't get that flow. It's just like we start back into the AIDS epidemic. Okay, didn't say anything about, you're going to talk about that. And then you pop into something else. And it's like, if you had a flow, and I'm only using my own because I had a time constraints this week, it just would have kept moving. But instead, it's like, you have to shift your thinking. You're like, oh, all right. This is going to take a little extra. Yeah, this is going to take a little extra.
Yeah, she's really worn me out, which is hard to do.
Yeah.
And
medical apartheid, remember? I mean, we remember how thick that book was.
That was so, the book is so well done.
Yes, it was thick, but it was well done. So if I was crunched for time, the flow would have, minus having to have my dictionary here, but still, I wrote those words down, went back to them later, still got through it. The flow was there. I love that book.
Yeah, Harriet had her stuff tight.
Yes, she did.
I think it's Laurie just, didn't have a good editor. Hey there.
Hey, Rick.
Hey, Venita, how's it going? Long time no see.
It's going well now that I see you.
I needed that. Sorry, I was kind of in bed. I couldn't sleep at all that last night because of low back pain that got me by surprise. Never been that strange. It's not like big pain, but it's everywhere. So you don't sleep, but it's not big. And I had worked until midnight on the report, and I still need to work. So I decided tonight that I won't be working. I'll work in the morning. And because I'm discovering that, I don't know, there's a new pandemic epidemic, if I may, which is the epidemic of finding excuses and always being very miserable. People with a job are having very hard. All of them have children, family. I don't, but they don't think it's hard for me. It's even harder because there's nobody to turn to once it's over.
Right.
But my question to everybody who complains about that, you're with your children, your husband or wife, in the home you bought, and the people you built that life, and you hate them, and you're miserable.
Right.
Maybe it's time for you to think a little bit more about what you do with your life.
Right.
Yeah,
sorry, I'm venting. Yeah. How's everybody?
I'm great.
We were just kind of filibustering. And waiting on you to get here. We had our standard complaint session about Laurie Garrett's writing.
No. The editor, I'm sure, was found in the Hudson River with cement over its feet. I don't know. It's the same guy who edited the Bible. Is that it? Where it's very redundant everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah,
I was saying I found the second half of this chapter a little bit better than the first, but it's still.
But think about it as a whole, and think about reading you're like, it took that long And it's like, you already talked about that.
Yep.
And okay, you're saying new stuff, but it's not that much. I mean, it's like, I
Well,
think she's running out of things to say.
I have to confess, Rick, I have the last couple of chapters, I just started skimming.
Yeah, like, zzz, okay, zzz, okay. Can I find the PDF and do Control F?
Rick, Rick.
And that's not me. I mean, I am really the one that likes to read every single word on the page. But
Yes.
this is just so out there. It's so disorganized.
It is.
That
She should go back to, she could create a new edition with the COVID,
Right.
but this time she can remove, like, she can skin it seriously and get it to a real good book. It would be a great book if, I think, if they had sorted a little bit better the order or the organization on the paper sheet. And I know it's difficult between all the factors, because we know diseases, there's social factors. There's, let's say, racial factors, not just social. There's sometimes racism involved. So all of these things, how do you organize them? In what order? Like, in clinical trials, we always say first in vitro, little lab tests, then animal models, then bigger animal models, then preclinical, first to human, phase 1, phase 1b, phase 1. There are steps, and the reason for that is you expand the detail in the meantime.
right.
So I think she should do something similar as a scientist, start from the general and the large and go to the subtle progressively. Like, she could have started just with the diseases, and at the end, and point out while talking about the context about poverty, promiscuity, and so on. And at the very end, say, okay, let's now talk about the social causes we barely touched in previous chapter just mentioned, so we can
Right.
explain as a whole what we just talked about. But
There are a number of different ways it could have been. I was just saying to Venita that they even, just as most academic writers, using an outline style with headings and subheadings, which even as a writer helps you focus on what is the key point that I'm trying to make in this section. And the fact that she doesn't have headings like that, I think, is what sends her off in a million directions. And she didn't have the right editor to, pull her into line. But this easily could have been 2 or 3 books. It could have even been the same length that it is. But as you're saying, if it had a structure, so, like I said, I love listening to Laurie Garrett. She's been very popular on the COVID speaking circuit this past year. She speaks wonderfully. I've even heard some of her criticisms of this book, which was written in 1994. But because I'm so turned off by it, even if she has found a better editor in the last quarter century, I don't want to read any more books by her, which is why you said her editor was found at the bottom of the river. Because, whether it's the editor's fault or not, it's your name and reputation.
That's what I say.
I'm trying to find the article. There's a lady out there who's doing that on her free time, pretty much in the same area of work that I am in. And she's been right about all the vaccines from the start. She's the one who said AstraZeneca, it's BS, be careful. Johnson & Johnson might be the superstar. She's the one who early on said Moderna and Pfizer are great. And I'd like to find the article because I don't remember her name, but I know I have it on my cell phone, so I'll look it later. I was just looking because talking about another Laurie Garrett, here's one.
Okay.
And she talked about something I didn't know. She was like, Americans, I'm for vaccines, but we need to be critical. And what they're doing is not being critical. That says everything's great. And she says, you got to be careful. And also, they're not listening to what's happening outside. So the Russian vaccine, she still doesn't like it because, yeah, she's right. Safe. I'm not going to explain why, but the way they report safety is voluntary. People don't report headaches voluntarily when they're busy. And it's 99% Moscow.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever. But she was talking about the Chinese, which actually it looks better than expected. And one vaccine that I know that exists. Cuba has a vaccine. It's in phase 3. It works really super well. They're vaccinating their population. They'll have so much they'll export to Bolivia, Venezuela, Cuba. Isolated, embargo, self-sufficient, but clever people. Poor, clever.
And
Well,
you know,
of all places.
Surprising, and you know, and it's also a reflection of your values. And I think that that is one of the points that Laurie Garrett is trying to make in this winding chapter.
Yeah.
You know, because as you get into the end of the chapter, where she's using like the case of measles and tuberculosis in particular in the US, and where drug addicts or prostitutes or poor people or Black people are the primary victims, then, you know, there's no real urgency.
No, there is. Preventative care, people are irresponsible. Rich people being affected, I want to cure. I want to cure. Really, right. It's insane.
And so we can see a lot of that parallel going on, of course, with COVID. Rick, let's hear your introduction, please.
Sure. My name is Rick. I'm from Queens, New York, and really happy to be here tonight and seeing Venita again for the first time in about 2 or 3 weeks, I guess.
Yes, a long time. I missed you.
Yes, and let me point out, because the schedule has changed so much, you know, over the course. We are on break next week, and then when we come, we have 3 weeks, and we can kiss Laurie Garrett goodbye, never to speak of her again. And
we'll be reading the Critic of Pure Reason by Immanuel Kant, a 600-page book of German philosophy.
I was telling Venita about the book Debt.
It's a big one, but it's fun to read. I mean, it's the first book like Laurie Garrett's that I read that I didn't stop because, first of all, I learned a ton of things. Graeber, who died unfortunately last year at 50, he was the Occupy Wall Street, not initiator, but one of the thinkers. In his book, for example, this is where I learned that slavery in Africa, the way it was done, had nothing to do, like in Arabic countries, the old school slavery of the Middle Age was having your own domestic. And the reason for that was, he explained it's a debt system. It was based on debt and spiritual debt. If somebody died, it must have been a spirit. So somebody must have done that. So the medicine man would determine who by, you know, and say, you are responsible for the death of that man. You don't even know it. So could you please be indentured servant for about 30 years for the family? Yeah. It was part of the system. Yeah. What happened later, and I learned that, is that he explains that slavery in Europe has always reappeared when coinage and not credit appeared, when you have money, physical money, and you divide people by their value, you know, instead of barter. And what he doesn't believe the barter was originally what existed, but he explains that there's only one instance they found in all the anthropological studies in all history of one small group providing 10 slaves to white people, but they were a cult. And they had this crazy cult, which is, you owe us your soul, give us your soul. And so when the white man came and they had some merchant things with them, said, hey, we can get you some people. Every other instance, as Graeber, you know, he goes against the myths. And he explains there's the thing about slavery. He says, I know it sounds outrageous, but it creates jealousy among Americans that are not Black, because their idea, and that's why they want to be Irish slaves. The myth of Irish slavery in America. You ever heard of that? Yeah. That's a right-wing thing. They confuse indentured and slave. And the thing is that they explain that the whole culture of that is that slaves have merit, which is subversive, because they worked harder than anybody else. They built more. They were more part of history. So henceforth, if you want to reward people, slaves should be CEOs. And Graeber says that's why they need racism to stay as it is, because you can't give people an opportunity to prove they're better than everybody else and then say, oops, oh no, they survived. But they won. Because that's the truth of it. So now Graeber is great about that. He talks a lot about the Middle Age and how he noticed 5th century before Christ and 15th century worldwide, slavery comes back, and it always coincides with coinage, with actual money replacing what money symbolized. In the past, money was an IOU. It was not even money. It was, hey, dude, we're 3,000 miles from each other through the Silk Road. Can't bring my merchandise here. It's too risky. So this is a IOU. Next time you come to China, I owe you the equivalent of maybe a camel. That started that way. Later it become, we don't need the camel anymore. I just need the IOUs. Because then the great novelty of money is that IOUs were personal. But now, Venita, your debt you have towards me, oh, you give me coinage? Forget about the debt. The debt now is in this hand. It has been transmitted to somebody else. I can sell your debt. That's what it means. I can use your debt as a product. And of course, that's the birth of America. No, the book is great, but he talks about everything and really new stuff, like talks about other societies. Like I was explaining to Michelle, in Northern, or was it? It's one Native American nation, saying thank you was an insult. Only enemies barter and say thank you. Thank you means submersion, mercy, you know? You don't say thank you to a family member. It's normal, they feed you. It shouldn't be. Thanking them is saying they could think otherwise than feeding you, which means insulting them. So it's fascinating, like it's fascinating. And also there was this a rule of going into somebody's home, you know.
Culture is and what is he, an archaeologist or an
no, he's economist. He started as an economist and was wondering, where does debt come from? I mean, in economy, they tell me about barter, but every anthropological study I read says barter is a myth. And it is a myth. It never existed. What he says is that it wasn't barter, it was credit that existed. And he explains that in Egypt, Pharaoh, big tyrant, you know, it's Egypt. Every 7 years, all debts were erased. Same thing in India. Because that means if people can't pay over 7 years, they will never pay. And that is using God's power to keep, you know, there's an idea of cycle of 7 years, like cosmic. Every 7 years, we purify people by removing all debt. They're forgiven. They're forgotten. It's Pharaoh.
Yeah, culture is really interesting. I read the Amazon, you know, let you look inside the book a little bit. I was reading, and I liked his writing style. So I think it'll be a refreshing break after what we have been through with Laurie. I've learned a lot from Laurie Garrett, and and I appreciate that. She just could have taught me a lot without being so repetitive and disorganized. And I would appreciate it.
Did I talk to you about HIV? Did I already? Oh, wait, let me talk to you again about HIV. So,
well, that's why I said to Michelle, I said the problem is, and I'll make it really quick, I was crunched for time this week. If the book flowed like it should flow, then I could have still just did like this and But when I got to open the page, it's like we're talking about AIDS again, and I look at the top, and I said, but didn't say anything about AIDS, and we've talked about AIDS. I'm an authority on AIDS now.
Exactly. No, that's the thing, is that now we, like, when people talk to me about Ebola, I'm like, well, 1979, Carl Johnson. They're like, what?
Yeah. So, but one quick question before we go any further. What is the name of the book that you're referring to again?
The first 5,000 years. I love the title because it says, we're on for more.
I won't be around. That's good.
And he connects debt to violence, not just to slavery, to violence in general. Because think about it, he's right. 450 wars in Europe between 1453 and 1990. They were all related to debt. All, like, the king said, hey, you owe me, Germany, 20, because they didn't used to do that before. They were family members. They gave money, they gave land. And all of a sudden they're giving coinage. And then the British are like, you gave me your coins? I want my coins. What? And it became dispute between families. I was telling Michelle this story about a prince in Württemberg who was loved by his population. For 4 years he spent to preserve this. It's a small principality in Germany. And then his creditors from France, everybody came up and say, hey, you got to reimburse or we invade. and we take whatever we can take to reimburse ourselves, pillage. He started slaughtering his own people. He started cutting hands of the man who wouldn't pay the tax back after 4 years of being loved. That makes you crazy. That's what the book says. That will make you violent. The pressure will make you.
Yeah, and he said he also touches on authoritarianism, which, you know, Venita, that's what I kind of wanted us to focus on next time. His name is what? David Graeber?
David Graeber. Yeah, Graeber. Yes. And he starts with the French and Madagascar. How and I didn't know that because in France we're not taught that, but it's true. We invaded Madagascar in 1910 to civilize. We slaughtered everybody, destroyed everything, and built roads for ourselves and our own army. We contracted on behalf of the people of Madagascar a huge loan from central banks all over the world to reimburse France for its war effort. We made the people we were invading paying for invasion. And when we left, after slaughtering them a little more because we realized we can't stay, they're going to kill us, the debt is still on. And because of that debt, in 1990, the IMF decided to pull the plug on the malaria program. 7,000 children died the first year because of that. It was like, and the whole beginning of the chapter is Graeber in one of these fancy drinking parties. And so he says, oh, I'm going to make you meet a lawyer who's for human rights. And he talks to that female lawyer about human rights, and he's all drunk. He talks about the story. She said, yeah, but if there's a debt, somebody's got to pay. He's like, no, but 5,000 children, he's got to pay.
That situation, you know, is in France is the issue with Haiti. You know,
Haiti. Sarkozy said we would erase the debt in 2010. We never did it, and the reason is obvious. It allows us to have leverage over Haiti and America. We have an area that they, you know why this debt is here. It's just because we were upset that Black people had chosen the French one to become independent the first time from the so-called superior race. It was very humiliating. In Europe, they laughed at us. We needed some sort of, compensation. It's horrible when you think about it.
It is. And
you're gonna ask it, give us money.
And I do think it goes to what Laurie Garrett is trying to talk about in this chapter in her meandering way. That that because of poverty, disease gets to spread. And some of the reason that countries are impoverished is because of this kind of debt arrangement that you're talking about, and so then you add on additional unanticipated healthcare expenses.
Yes.
And and they can't handle it. And so then you get all of these crazy kind of outcomes going on. Like there was one country, it may have been Burma, where she was talking about the healthcare workers feeding people cyanide. This was one of the HIV stories. And, they didn't have a structure for dealing with this strange new disease, and they weren't,
But there's something she isn't talking about in the chapter that disappointed me. HIV was a Western disease in the mentality of dictatorships. But when I was in Japan as a kid, or South Korea, Japanese people could not get HIV, they said, because it's a white disease, decadent people. India had the same idea, etc. Africa had the same idea as well at one point. And the Europeans had the same idea about everybody else. So when there's a new epidemic, what's fascinating is how racism comes back everywhere. Oh, the white dogs brought HIV. Then, oh, it's African. You know how they are in Europe. It's horrible. It's like a response to an epidemic has to be objective and universal. But clearly,
we see it now here in the U.S. There's a lot of violence toward Asians going on.
This is absurd. In Flushing, why would you go to Flushing? Here's my thing about the guy who pushed a woman. What are you doing in Flushing if you don't like Chinese people? it's kind of a neighborhood where they're mob, you know? So what? You were looking for somebody to beat up? Yeah. And you know what shocks me? Nobody ever intervenes. People say I don't want to get into trouble. I always intervene. Never got really into trouble. Probably because when you intervene, people are happy. No, but I do intervene sometimes if I see a guy do that in the street, I come from the back and I sucker punch him. I don't even talk. I just sucker punch the guy down to the ground. You know, you need to help the person.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, Asian Americans, my girlfriend being Japanese, I'm happy she left for Japan last year because she was constantly asked, you know, she went on dates with people, and being Japanese, she realized something from white men. She's a trophy. Because you know the myth about Asian women. It's like the myth about black men.
What's the myth?
That they're very tight.
Oh, all right.
And so there's this fetish that is extremely harrowing. I mean, every Asian woman I talk to me about that. Like, and they're surprised that I never, you know, seem to fantasize about their culture. I fantasize about them individually, you know. And well, maybe what helped is I grew up in Japan at one point, but like her first date with an American, the guy came up with a anime t-shirt at the date. You know, like those Japanese cartoons. She likes comic books, but not manga. She liked comic books about history. And she is absolutely, I mean, she's like, why? You know, he talked about Dragon Ball Z the whole date. And I was like, you like Dragon Ball Z? No.
It's a shame.
No, racism is really present. And what really surprises me is that I was the first victim. And I know not a single minority believed that, but I was a victim as a kid of thinking, people around me are not racist. They can't be. They're too nice. Even among white people. Sometimes you would say things, but you'd say, it's just being politically incorrect. No, they're all fucking racist. They all were. I was just being too nice, but they all were. I mean, seriously, but now they're out of the woods because thanks to the catalyst Donald Trump, these guys, and not just Donald Trump, in Europe, there's a lot of dictators now. We have Hungary, Poland, France is getting there. We're getting there, even without Le Pen. Macron's doing it. Like he has this new law about separatism, it's called, to prohibit separatism under the Republic. Okay, what does that mean? Pretty much Muslim people, you know, preaching what they preach, and they have a second. The Ministry of Education asked for a official investigation into how the university manages Islamo-leftism, which in France is a way to talking about post-colonial movements who try to explain that terrorism comes from a reason, which is our behavior in some of these countries. Not saying that we're justifying terrorism, but that terrorism can only appear when you destroy an entire country and whatever. It's not a scientific concept because Islamism is far right. You know, technically it's far right. Tradition, women there, 1 to 40, nobody moves. That's far right. That's not far left. But any movement so she asked for an everybody's like, it's not a concept. What do you define as Islamo-leftism? And she's like, oh, I'm being attacked. And so we're getting to that, you know, Macron is Trump, but with a beautiful face and nice words, but it's really the same. Like there was this kid once who went to see him say, Mr. President, you know, in the street, I can't find a job. I work in arts, crafts, and in France it's sacred. Craftsmanship, like, oh, it's an incredible job. You don't live with it, but you so said what Macron said, I know 3 restaurants there that I go to that look for people to work. You just have to cross the street. And he left. So since then, we always tell him, hey, Mr. President, you want to cross the street during the yellow vest? He was like, so we're getting there. But,
I learned a new word today on a podcast. Do you all know what a ditto head is?
Ditto head? Ditto head. I heard the expression once. I don't know.
I've heard before.
You know what it is?
Well, I don't. Well, today it's about 95% of people I run into. What is it, Michelle?
Yes. So I learned this on, it was a Michael Moore podcast, and he was interviewing a man, I don't know the guy's name, a historian. And so the historian was talking about when he was 23 years old, he listened to Rush Limbaugh. And he said he was driving a delivery truck and he would listen to Rush 4 hours a day, every day of the week, which is a frightening concept. But one of the things that he learned from that exposure was the term ditto head, which just means whatever the leader says, no matter how crazy, outrageous, off the wall it is, ditto. And so when you look at these politicians and the big lie and how they keep repeating the big lie, that's the ditto.
Okay. Oh, that explains why the only time I heard that expression was in a punk song by Slayer. A very violent metal band against politicians. Ditto head! That's the name of the song. He yells, ditto head! It's funny. Now I know what he means in the lyrics. Thank you. It's been 30 years in the making to understand that song.
Yeah, but it's just, it's frightening to imagine listening to Rush Limbaugh for 4 hours a day.
But there's a thing that we can tell people.
But really listening to anybody, to me, even, someone you agree with, even someone that has a positive message, listening to anything that much is going to take its toll. It's going to get in your head,
Well, I think there's one thing people don't understand when you're a man. We're raised with the idea of, in all movies, the guy who's being bullied, the hero who's the underdog, and then there's a triumph and there's this moment of rage where I will survive and blah, blah, blah. Hatred is entertaining and gives you emotions that are paramount to drugs. So you have this feeling of power, like, I want to kill people. So people like Rush Limbaugh, hate mongers, are super attractive to isolated people who are bored. Because that's not boring to tell you, you have to work hard. You will make it, but you need to blah, 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 and respect other people. Not funny. You know what? These guys telling you to respect them, they're nah. They deserve the poll. I'm kidding. It's just humor. You're right. You know what I mean? It's
yeah.
I think hatred, you look at the Nazis and also the French revolutionaries that were slaughtering children. They were, whatever the war, it's not just a kill. They add to the kill cruelty that is absolutely unnecessary. And I'm talking about, for the French, they used to take black bread, which was a symbol of being poor, white bread that they would steal from the aristocrats, and their children, they would open their wounds and take their blood as sauce. That is reported by several chroniclers. It was the revolution. The war in Spain, same thing. They would make priests run, the leftists, that they didn't do anything, and just shoot them in the back. The right would do the same thing with peasants that, hey, you didn't leave them, the communists came in, you're one of them, in front of the wife. Useless cruelty. But the thing that one author told about the war in Spain, and I know I saw that in Syria from people who went there, they're having fun. War is fun to these people.
The difference between Donald Trump and any normal human being, like Joe Biden is glaringly boring, Donald is exciting. I mean, for whatever you feel about him, he gets your blood boiling. And the media cannot let go of that dude because
he's good for TV.
He's good for TV.
Yeah, but
Joe, go on, Venita.
No, I was just going to say, but it's just history repeating itself. It's the same play. When they took me in the middle of the green and beat my skin off of me and closed the schools and the businesses, because we're going to see a Negro being the skin beaten off them today. We're going to see a pregnant woman that's 8 months pregnant. They're going to beat her until the baby falls out of her body. And we're going to close the school. You're going to bring your children. So to be honest with you, a lot of this monstrous, if it's any word beneath that, behavior that as a Black person or anybody today sees going on, you're talking to the choir. Mm-hmm. We're talking about the French doing what? Doing what? Well, this is not new for us. The Donald Trump is not new for us. The same way, but it was a lot of Donald Trumps. It was a whole bunch of them standing around waiting for the show to start.
A nation of them.
And what's really sad about it, to show you how monstrous these people are, they want their children to see the show. Little Ann, little Sue, little Bobby, I want you to stand here and see this animal, not a human. I want you to see this animal get beat to the skin come, and then we're going to hang them, and we're going to rip their bodies apart. So this sickness, did you see with Donald Trump? This ain't no new shit.
I know.
And I don't know why everybody's acting like all of a sudden I see people going, oh my God. Oh my God. Well, I guess if you're not me, you might say, oh my God. But for me, it's business as usual.
But there's a thing that people don't say that we reconcile a lot of white people with anti-racism.
Yes.
Is to remind them what I do a lot. The people who were colonizing Africa in the 19th century in France were the same who were shooting at my great-grandparents because they were striking in mines. They're the same people. The people who oppress the white and the Blacks are the same. Now, they oppress Blacks way more because it's easier, because that's the way to control white people. Hey, look, there's somebody below you. You have merit.
Yes.
You're poor, but you're not that poor. And if you become poorer, that means you're Black. That means you're like them. That means you deserve to be outside of society. And the problem is when you use a whole nation as a device of leverage against your own. That's what they're doing with Black people. They use it as leverage. Look at the suburban speech of Trump. It was, that's what I appreciate with Trump, at least. Yes, he lies, but he lies so blatantly that, he's lying, first of all. And second of all, when he doesn't lie about what he thinks, he says it. Well, no, there are good people on both sides. Bad people on both sides, too. Suburban wives, think about all the Black people coming to your neighborhood. And I'm thinking that's like the taco trucks. Not a good idea, because I know a lot of suburban wives will be like,
just don't get the disease. Get it.
I mean, it's just so sick. I just, I really get nauseated when I think about it, and I live with it all the time. It makes me really sick. And just to see how sick.
The lynching, Venita, I was reading about a case this week, the Claude Neal lynching, because I have been doing a little bit of research on the Odom side of my family. And a lot of them apparently came from Jackson County, Florida, where Marianna is the county seat. And Jackson is like right at the top of Florida, the top western.
Near Alabama.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
Down to Florida.
Yeah. And there was this case in, I think it was 1934, Claude Neal, where the white people were upset because so some white men broke him out of jail and they killed him. But the white people in town were upset because they, were riled up, ready to see a lynching. They had sold cards and everything, and they were trying to put on the show that you're talking about. But it was just such a ugly case. They mutilated him in all kinds of ways, throwing body parts at the crowd to try to calm them down. Because once you get people in that kind of a frenzy,
And that's what Trump is doing. That's what Trump is doing. But somebody's doing to the white folks too. See, that's where everybody's thrown now. That's
we're also making the point with this Jackson County that in the Reconstruction period after slavery, that the Klan activity was so bad there that the police couldn't control, because they had killed off several sheriffs. Talk about controlling the white people. And so I wanted to say to Rick, I think it's one reason that it's easier to oppress Black people is because we have the color. You can see who we are, and you can use that as a reason to divide and conquer. But it's a different kind of conundrum that you have going on now among white people, where you don't really know who's who. You don't know, are you the white guy that invaded the Capitol, Rick? Well, are you the Secret Service?
I wouldn't have been allowed without an invitation from Congress as president. I'm sorry, just sorry how arrogant I can be. But no, you're right. I mean, you know why I wouldn't have invaded the Capitol? For one reason. They're going to shoot me. I would have fought that. I would have fought this is like entering an airport restricted area while moving like this. They're going to shoot you, No, I'm white. I can come in if I want to. What's crazy for me is that.
You don't have to. Yeah, in fact, apparently, these guys were so important at this point. They're planning to go back with their full armor. The only thing they're mad about is they didn't bring their arsenal.
The Black Panthers got their leaders years of isolation in federal prison for going in front of the California Congress with weapons which were legal. And Ronald Reagan was so incensed, he called Nixon and used the N-word all over the call. And Nixon, I love the archive from the White House. I listened to a lot of them. He shut his phone and everything's recorded. He's like to his side, whoa, he's so racist. They're like, you're Richard Nixon saying somebody's racist? That must mean this person's really racist. But back then, they were chastised their language officially. The big difference between Trump and every other president we had, except Obama, is obviously Trump doesn't know how to control his language. And I think what Trump revealed, people say, oh, they're scared by Trump. They don't want to get challenged in primaries. No, I think Trump, they like him because Trump did what the Republican Party didn't dare to do for years.
That's right.
But was itching to doing. Let's not talk about immigrants, but about Black people. Oh, shit. Brown people.
Right. Trump says the stuff out loud you're not supposed to say out loud, but you do anyway.
To that.
And that's what concerns me about Biden. Because, as you were saying about the vaccine, Rick, and being critical. And there's a piece in this chapter where she's talking about one of the vaccines that they had been using for years, thinking you had a lifetime immunity. And then a few years later, children started getting whatever, I don't know if it was the measles or whatever, but it started recurring. And then they were like, well, we thought you had a lifetime immunity, but they didn't know. And that's my point, that when profit is a factor in these decisions, then we're just getting stuff out there. And so that's my concern, that Biden is so focused on getting shots in arms. I didn't see the part where he asked any critical questions, or his team asked any critical questions about this vaccine that Donald had very hastily put together.
Actually, surprisingly, the US is the benchmark for the world in terms of how it was approved, because unlike Europe, so Europeans, the EMA, the European Medicines Agency, that's the ability for a product to be authorized in the European Union for commercialization, doesn't mean it's reimbursed. That's national authorities that decide. The EMA said that clinical trials were suboptimal in their design, in how people were recruited, suboptimal. They did not ask for what we call post-marketing requirements, which is usually the regulatory authorities going to say, okay, we understand there's a big unmet need, it's cancer, we don't have time to wait 5 years to know if the new treatment really works. So you owe us every 2 years from now on a follow-up trial, and data needs to be given to us for reimbursement to be maintained. The US doesn't do that. That's one of the problems in the US for insurers, is that they cannot say no. But the thing that's interesting is that the FDA is the only regulatory authority that said about Pfizer and everybody else, no. You owe us a full clinical trial, expanded to a greater number of people over the next 2 years. You cannot stop the trial. That's why when they tell you they're studying the booster and stuff, how do they know? Because they're still running the trial. The US said, if we don't have data every 2 months or something like that, interim data, we remove it from distribution immediately. And those that have more data get the priority. So, and for example, in France, this idiot Ministry of Health, and this is to your point, you got to be cautious. He said the AstraZeneca latest results are phenomenal. Do not use the word phenomenal in science, are great, are incredible. You talk about what it is. The data says this, nothing more. You do not characterize it. And doing that shows the propaganda. The guy's worried that people are getting angry at him because they're not getting their vaccine and they have doubts. So he says, oh, vaccine is incredible. Look, it's beautiful. No, it's not. It's still an intervention that can have serious side effects if not well understood. And we don't understand them. But there's a priority right now to save a little bit the society from itself. So, but no, again, I think Biden is not critical because surprisingly, because Trump is not able to weigh on the FDA as much as people think. The FDA, unlike the CDC, maintain a form of independence that I find surprising after the fact. But Europe, it's a nightmare. It's stupid the way they're dealing with that, and they're not giving. The UK is proving that Brexit can work because they're doing well, and the European Union's authority is responsible for the fiasco. Like they didn't buy enough doses. They asked nations to buy their own doses through the European Union, making it a nightmare, like the US during the testing debacle and PPE debacle. Mm-hmm. So at one point, it's just nobody, it's always nobody wants to take responsibility. And I truly think when you look at history and people like Pericles in Greece, Caesar, dictators are not. What they have in common, they loved leading. They loved the challenge. They loved major battles. They loved building an empire. Where are these people? Where are the people who, like in Rome and China or Africa from the Dogon Empire, built roads through the Sahara 7,000 years before we understood how to build them? Mm-hmm. Where is that spirit? This is where I'm disappointed. I love people who are creative. And I think when people say you need education, that's true. You look at craftsmanship in nations that are called quote unquote primitive in the sense that they're Bronze Age, like Amazon. The refinement shows that no, it's not true. And it's just, I'm so tired of people wanting to be, because I always tell there's a story the racists don't realize that once all the people he hated are gone, it's the story in the Nazi movie, all the object of your hatred is gone, but the hatred's still there. And now it consumes you. And I wanted to talk to you about that, but there's been this article from an author. She was a specialist of what? Urban planning, I think. No, credit banking. She was an economist, and she happens to be Black. And in 1992, she went to Congress, and she made them listen to calls from credit agencies to people, the harassment that was against constitutional right. And she did a great report. Nothing happened. Worse, they reinforced their power. And so she was like, wait, it was because I was a Black woman and they thought, yeah, cool, utopian, idealist. Who cares? You're a hippie, pretty much. But she thought about the fact that now there's a huge cost to society. So she's writing a book about the cost of racism to society, not just to Black people. She shows that racism destroys even white people. There's a cost to that. And I thought about that rewatching American History X the other day. There's a cost to racism when you're white.
Yeah, there is. There is. And I think that's been clear to a lot of Black people, for a long time. I mean, again, if we go to the lack of public health infrastructure that Laurie Garrett is talking about here. if we look at what that public health sector looks like at the onset of COVID, you know, the bitterness, the hatred, how Venita and I read about in Cast, the book we were reading in our other book group, an example of remember that white man in Virginia or West Virginia, I think it was, Venita.
He'd rather die.
He would rather die. He would rather die than see Darky have Medicaid.
Yep.
And he was dying of like cancer or some shit. He desperate and had no health insurance.
Yep.
But he said he would rather die than have Black people have public health insurance. And so he died.
He did.
That's called natural selection. You gotta let nature go its way. Let that happen.
Well, you know, good. Rick, one thing for sure is that, and I try to explain that, and I brought up a couple of times to my Black friends and family. I don't know where everybody was or what you've been doing or where you're just walking around in the mindless state for the last 50 years. But one thing I have learned is they will take one for the team.
Yeah.
See, that's something that Black folks are not always willing to do. But a white boy, that's why you always got to have one. You got to have one white friend. Because if you go into the concert and somebody go crazy, you best believe that white boy, once he gets some weed and a couple of drinks, he will take on an army of people. And he will take one for the team. If he don't get killed, even if he's banged up, he would like, yes, I took it. They don't mind.
Well,
That's why when you see that insurrection, aka terrorist act, and you see the Congress running around like, oh, they all scared. They was willing, a lot of them, because they asked, what did you think? To take one for the team. If they had to take one for the team and they can do what they wanted to do, then there wouldn't have been a problem. So you can't underestimate them. And that's something that people just, folks just tend to not do. They want to blame it. I know it's hard to embrace that, but you have to. They just don't understand.
Well,
they will say,
the reason why white people can take one for the team, think about what happened with Amy Cooper, right? The Central Park lady that just got a little, even though that was a death, an attempted murder by proxy in a way.
Don't care.
Because, white woman getting raped by a Black man in a park, killed a Black man. I'm a cop, be a hero.
Yes.
So it's because I think clearly one of the biggest taboo in American society is not noticed, and I thought about it biologically, physiologically. It seems that white people can only feel empathy physically for people who look like them. Because when Black people suffer, it's always, they played a race card, but they should strap their boots and get a job and start complaining. It's so strange. But when a white person I have a lump here. Oh my God, oh my, so sorry. Oh, did you see the doctor? Do you want a cocoa? It's incredible. The contrast, a Black kid gets gunned down by the cops, going to his car, several bullets in the back. I say kid because he's like 10 years younger than me, but everybody's like, yeah, but why did he go to his car? Yes. The lady runs to a cop car to knock on the window in the middle of the night, gets shot by the cop.
Yes.
How dare you, police officer? The cop was Asian American. So you're like, this was going to take one for everybody else. And you're looking at cops, same thing. Who's the other cop that went to jail for the shooting in the Nightcap building like 7 years ago? The accidental shooting of a kid going down. He shot them. He was Asian American. He went to jail, this guy.
Yeah.
But
racism, the Rush Limbaughs, the brainwashing, the teaching, the actual teaching of racism to young children.
Yes.
It's all very effective. It's all very effective.
I'm starting to think that, when they say structural racism,
but it goes to this issue of vaccine hesitancy And Venita and I were just reminiscing about Harriet Washington, who wrote Medical Apartheid that we love so much. And she was on a podcast recently talking about this issue of Black people and vaccine hesitancy, and the logic of it, the logic of it, because and they started out asking her, so is this because of Tuskegee? And so Harriet says no, and you need to stop saying that.
Yes.
Because you have a lot of Black people that couldn't even,
don't know about it.
Tuskegee.
Yeah.
Their fear is coming from current experiences in their own lives, because you still have doctors and medical professionals who don't believe Black people experience pain in the same way. So if you got that going on among medical professionals, then what do you expect from a beat cop?
But look at that, the thing you're talking about, pain, which is interesting. You know what's the rationale behind that? It's actually a physiological fact. Black people have a thicker skin. Thicker skin does not mean the nerves are below the skin. They're still at the surface. So pain is the same. But think about it. They're physicians. They study. They're intelligent. They don't remember that. They're looking for reasons to deny the pain. But the book just tells you the skin is thicker. So when you cut for surgery, use this tool, not this one. It's just 1-2 millimeters more. But but it doesn't tell you that the pain is located below. You feel they're trying to find.
Well, I've interviewed my doctors. I actually interview them, and I let them know that I'm a potential client, and it's up to me, depending on how you want to move, how you answer my questions. If I decide to hire you, you work for me. Okay, I will tear a doctor's ass up. Okay, and I have my new rheumatologist. I told him the same thing. I interviewed him. I went to a consultation. My other one retired. He's real cool. One of the old head mathematicians. I loved him. If you're going to get a disease on the onset, you need somebody that's real, and he was real. But he referred me to someone else that he had known for years, and his son, and I trust him because he told me on the way out, look, you don't need this, and that. You're not an experiment. This is what you need. It's in check. Bam. I'm giving my license, but I still can consult. Somebody try to pull some crazy, call me. So I interviewed him, and as soon as I got to, so the doctor's already called me twice. I said, well, okay. So, and I wanted to wait for him to talk first, to see the kind of questions he was going to ask, and whatever case he said. And I got done, and I told him, this is the interview. I have a debilitating, chronic, sometimes fatal disease. I need to make sure your shit is together.
Yeah.
And I don't know
if he's wrong for 3 months, it could kill you.
Well, the problem is that I don't know. When you go to the doctor, if everything's fine, everything is fine. I don't know if you got skills until I get a flare up.
Yep.
That's when I know if you have skills.
Well, he identified lupus nephritis versus attack to the nervous central system.
That's what I'm saying.
Symptoms are similar, apparently.
And how well you listen. But I find a lot of people, particularly my own people, and it's through years of conditioning. And it's a Jesus thing too.
Yeah, Jesus has my soul. Yeah.
Yeah, and which is conditioning, that they really are afraid many times to ask questions. They're actually afraid. This is the doctor, it's the Lord, God. It's the doctor.
It's like the priest, the preacher, the doctor, the teacher, and the mayor.
Right. So we have to talk to our, there's various reasons why we're hesitant to take vaccines and even trust doctors. But a lot of us too is that because of the way we've been treated, a lot of us feel like we don't have the right to question the doctor. We don't have the right to question this vaccine. We don't have a right to do this. We don't have a right to do that. And it just pains me. And if we don't care, no one else cares. And then again, they want to put everything on this fear. I haven't taken a shot yet. I'm not anti-vax. I vaccinated my
There's no
children.
data on people with lupus.
Thank you. And
that's the problem, is that it could work, but you're not going to be the guinea pig of your own, you're not. And I absolutely no. And being critical doesn't mean you're anti-vaccine. It's like, I'm not anti-oncology. I'm just not going to take chemotherapy if I don't need it.
And this is exactly what I'm saying. You're sitting here, they contradict themselves. You said that we have not done research on people that have autoimmune diseases. We have not done research on women that are expecting. We have not done research on teenagers and children. But on the other hand, you telling me, get on down there.
Take it all. They're all good.
You said before that we had the quarantine for 14 days because of economics. Now you put it down to 10 so you can get your ass back to work. And if you had the vaccine and you have been exposed to someone with COVID, you don't need to quarantine at all.
I'm astonished at the fact that not a single epidemiologist had the balls, and I don't have them because I'm like, if I do it, I might get the media's attention. There's one thing that they're not telling us with the quarantine. Why are surges 6 weeks apart? Incubation period is longer than what we thought it was. It's not 14 days, it's 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks. And you saw the baby. We got a case study from, I don't know what city was it, Cleveland? A baby was born. Oh, positive COVID.
Yes.
His viral load was 5,243 times greater than that of the most severe cases of COVID.
Yes, I saw that.
I didn't see that.
They took his blood, went to the lab, look at the genome. It's a new variant.
Yes, it was a newborn baby. Yes, it was, Michelle. Newborn
babies, because they're as a fetus, get contaminated, and we know that with AIDS too, retroviruses feeds off stem cells and mutates rapidly, because you know what stem cells do? They can be any cell. They can be your finger cell. They can be your brain cell.
Yes.
It's like a nightmare. It's like, stop mutating.
Yes.
They say right now there's no trend, but they're like, wait, so that means how many babies are getting born and nobody's identifying that? Yeah. And maybe there are variants everywhere. And maybe, they're starting to shaking with the turtle.
That's what I mean about, even though I like Joe Biden, I think he's, for the most part, on the right track. But I think that he has as much of an interest as Donald Trump did to try to balance the economic pressures.
Yes, he does.
All of this. And so because of that, while Donald couldn't control what he said, and so therefore we knew why Donald was doing what he's doing, Joe has a lot more self-control. And my concern with Joe is that we may not be getting the full story, because ultimately what he wants is to get us back out there. I was also listening to another virologist on a podcast talking about how she doesn't understand why we don't understand that, we keep going into these kind of lockdown periods. Mm-hmm. And then when things start to get better, like they're supposedly getting a little bit better right now, cases going down. And then we start to open things up more, like, now they had an event at the Barclays Center, and, that kind of thing going. And she's like, if we would just stay in lockdown long enough to really get the thing out of control, under control, then we could get through this thing and really open up in a sustainable way. But instead, we're doing this yo-yo thing.
But because of that, it's over.
Because we're not letting anything take. And
this would have been the great strategy at first. Now, because of how long it's been, how much they played yo-yo, here's the problem. Next lockdown, we might have a collapse of the food supply chain. Destruction of the economy will lead to major problems that are... So the thing is, these idiots, instead of doing one big thing in February for 2-3 months, they're like, hey, let's see, open here. Yeah, let's play. Now we're at a point where the economy cannot afford to collapse. Because if it does, with all the despair, we're going for a hell of a ride. And I think that one thing that is obvious in terms of the what's going on is you look at Biden, you look at everybody. It's as if, I mean, cases are going down not because of lockdown. I'm trying to tell people something. For a long time, I thought it was density, but then I understood with New York City what it was: precarity. Being precarious, being promiscuous is the real concept. Density, if density was the trick, Singapore and Hong Kong would have been slaughters, or Tokyo. They weren't. What do Tokyo, Hong Kong have in common? They're very isolated people living at home, seeing some limited family. They have a lot of work, so they go out with few friends. They're social and they use masks, whatever. New York City, where were the main casualties? Elmhurst, Woodside. Lots of undocumented immigrants living in 9-10 people in very small quarters.
Yeah.
It's promiscuity. And look at what happened during this winter. Even family members don't go to see each other because of the snow. What really drove for me contamination were private gatherings.
Yes, it
were
was.
people going from one place to another, and through who? Through the little children of corn, like I call them now, the kids. The kids have, maybe they have a load of 5,000 viruses and are like, I don't have symptoms. And then, hey, grandma, hey, grandpa, going from one place to another, going to family dinner, and then 85,000 deaths in France. I'm thinking about that. And so my opinion is, just think about people, that it's working when you're not meeting each other. The real effort is not to shut down society. We could have open stores with masks and stuff. It's that we need a real effort. And a lot of people did it. Look, I didn't see my family a lot. I actually saw my sister maybe 4 times this year. We live in the same building. I didn't get it, I guess, which is a miracle. I'm in a neighborhood where the positivity rate was 30%.
I mean, normally Rick and I, get together occasionally. We have
2 years almost.
Done anything. And, but in terms of the precarity, in addition to the crowded housing conditions that some people live in, I'm thinking about a story one of my girlfriends was telling me when we had, I don't remember if it was the first or second reopening in New York after being locked down last year. And she lives in Manhattan, and she was talking in the East Village, and she was talking about walking around in downtown Lower Manhattan, and you couldn't go inside the restaurant, but you could have a beer outside on the street. Right. And she was talking about how packed the streets were.
Yes.
Where you were really having to because people were congregating outside the bar. And they had their dogs, or she was telling me one lady had her puppy and a bowl of water down on the floor blocking the street. So, our capacity to kind of hunker down and get through this, it's not great, apparently.
But hey, great news.
Halitosis, and I definitely have halitosis. I'm tired of it, and I thought that we would be further along by now. But I can handle it.
Well, I thought about some of our adventures, you and I, Michelle, when I was homeless. Later, what happened to you? It pretty much prepared us for that. The isolation, nobody looking at you because you're nobody anymore. At first it was okay for me. Now my problem is that I need air, and I don't like people, but there are no people in museums. But problem is, museums were closed for so long. Now they're reopening, which is true. By the I always tell people, you want a place that's safe during the pandemic? Libraries and museums. Nobody goes there.
Okay.
Go to the gym. Did you notice? Everybody was like, we need to reopen gyms. Nobody was saying we need to reopen the libraries and museums, guys. Seriously, culture's dying.
That's what I'm saying.
I always miss the library.
I do too in museums. I mean, you know, Sean, I'm an art person. And I'm telling you right now, I don't need to go to a restaurant ever again in life. I don't need to go to it.
I think it's the Metropolitan Museum of Art, one of the
Yes.
big places, was talking about they're going to have to start selling off their artwork to keep the lights on.
No,
and that's sad.
enough.
And that's really sad. That's really sad.
There's a guy who bought what's the name of the incredible painting? Something Mundi. It's a Leonardo da Vinci, one of his most famous paintings, one of the three most famous. The French sold it to a Qatari guy who has it on his yacht. One of the greatest pieces of the Renaissance on a yacht.
Yeah.
So now I become Indiana Jones. I'm like in the middle of the ocean at night. Yeah. So you will never leave me alone, Mr. Jones. It belongs to the museum. Sorry. You know what the old thing on the movie. It should not be on a yacht.
Well, you know, I think it's a lot
to
hit
an iceberg. And then they hit an iceberg, and the rest is history.
Yes. I think one of the main problems is people have problems being with themselves. I've never had a problem being before lupus, so this is really easy anyway for me. But I don't have a problem being with myself. And I know in New England, these folks, and New England is always predominantly Caucasian, aka white.
Really?
You know,
it doesn't sound.
Yeah,
Vermont seems very, very multicultural.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, I'm white too, Vic, but I ain't want to tell nobody.
I don't see skin color.
I'm incognito right now, so don't tell anybody. No, but because of being in New England in particular, these folks love their, and I guess that all comes with white privilege. Always having your freedom. You know, how dare you say I can't go to that restaurant and suck down, 3 shots of scotch. I need to go on my boat. I need to meet my friends. I need to go and fly to islands and make everybody else sick there. I need to go down to the AME church that was open to provide vaccines for people in predominantly Black areas to make sure they get them if they want them. But no, I checked all around and there was no one done to be found. So I found the AME church, a group of privileged white folks that's not even the age group, and I'm going down and get my shot. It's something about having that privilege and that right of movement.
In Queens and Bronx, they noticed that people from wealthy New Jersey, Connecticut, and upstate New York are coming to the city to cut through the line because they have an address here, even though they don't live here. And the system is not built to verify permanent residency. But I'd like a law to be passed that after the fact, if we realize after doing the audit that some people did that, it's 1 year jail.
But they're doing it here too. They actually live in New York.
I know, but they should be very strict.
They start flocking here, buying more property from New York. So now they have 2 addresses and they can go back and forth between each state.
Look at the 2 chicks in Florida who dressed up as grannies.
That's crazy. They was high. They must have smoked. Weed don't make you.
No, they already got their first dose doing that. That's the scandal. It's another person. They were coming for the second shot, and the person was like going to the car, really checking. Like, come on. You already got a first shot, and that's why they explain on the body cam, you stole those vaccines. It's theft. And he's right. It's theft. And they're like, I'm sorry. At one point, I know it's not nice to make fun of people and pretend they're idiots, but when they are, I mean, but you're right. It's like, it's.
Yeah, but you're right, Venita. There's this culture of, I usually listen to Morning Joe, Joe on MSNBC in the morning with Joe's conservative self. But Nika was off yesterday morning, and Joe just kindly said, casually said, Mika's in the south of France. She's got the day off. And I'm thinking, what? Are we in a pandemic or are we not? How did you get to the south of France? Did you have a private plane? And what is it that you had to do that was so important?
Nothing.
You're a morning talk show host in the United States.
No.
Why
It's one
did
of the
you have
toughest
to go to
professions
the
in the
show?
world, Michelle. I don't say that. It's very difficult. Do you know how tough it is? You don't know. You have no idea.
I know, but it's this privilege. It's this privilege, and and now I'm
What's the name
telling you that
of that
now that
other?
they, I can't even watch these congressional hearings going
Oh,
on this week. I watched the impeachment hearings,
Mhm.
every single word,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
That's
and I
historical.
knew what the outcome was going to be before it started. But to see that outcome,
Mm-hmm.
um, so I don't know what they're doing now. So now you're going to drag the police officers in there, and what? What?
Nothing.
Nobody's getting punished for this thing.
No.
You know
That's
what
a
they did in
criminal.
Germany? The last person who did that, I know it's a bad example, but in 1924, when a certain Adolf Hitler did that in München, he was jailed. But here's the horrible story. He was jailed for high treason to life, something like that. The the Republic of Weimar didn't have enough money to maintain prisons, so low-level threats um, people were let go, and he was a political prisoner, so low-level threat, they let him go. So you're like, okay, it's all the scale. I think what I find surprising with the Capitol is pretty much now I know that after 9/11, people were happy about 9/11 in America, and what I mean by that is that the whole crying, the whole pray, they get a kick from it. They get something paramount to an orgasm, a spiritual, like I'm such a good person, because 9/11 was not an American thing. It was people from outside, foreigners, but they don't care when it's actual problems coming from the country. America's pure. The outside is
Right,
ugly. It makes
right,
sense. But
right.
they take a
If
kick from
after all
9/11.
the shit that
They couldn't
Donald
stop talking about
Trump
it for 7
did,
years.
if you can't even pull it together to have a vote that says he can't run for federal office anymore, if you can't
But they don't
administer
want
that
to.
much.
But they don't want to. This
No,
is all
it's not important to them.
theatrics. They don't want to. It's theatrics. Just like the morning talk show host. Does anybody understand they are scripts? Yep. This is their profession. Has nothing to do with nothing. Yep. They got a script. This is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be the opposing person. You're supposed to be the opinion person. This is a job.
And you're supposed to be Rick Santorum, which we don't really know why you're here. I still wonder why he's been.
In the evening, when they get into their big bins.
But think about it.
We talk about those beautiful leather seats and turn that wonderful music on and get that ambiance going. It's a job. It's a job. So they're not trying to do anything in Washington. That's the theatrics for the little people.
Yeah. No, their job is to get money for campaigns.
And it really is disgusting. But no one, Donald Trump, people talk about, this is America. It has always been America. America's been America for as long as it's been America. And why are people saying, I hear people, well, this is not who we are. Yes, the hell it is.
You've always been that. This is what I didn't appreciate when Joe Biden says this is not who we are, blah. I'm like, what? The Capitol crowd was the same crowd that lynched people for decades.
Well, you heard what they said when they went to Capitol. We're taking back our capital. Our capital. Did you hear them say ours? Not black folk, not brown folk or Japanese folk, any other folk. This is the white man's capital with a couple of Cubans sprinkled in and one black person that was lost. He know where the hell he was.
No, you also have black influencers who are trying to make money off the Trump movement that play I used to be liberal and they go all in. Like I'm thinking about Candace Owens. What I really love, my favorite moment of Candace Owens is in England when she doesn't realize. It's very strange because conservatives in Europe are the ones who killed the Nazis with the communists. So but we work together. Like, not the far right, the conservatives, like military, work with the communists to create social security in France. So it's very different there. And when she went there to the British conservatives, say, well, Hitler was okay until he was good with his nation and then brought it to other nations. That's when it was wrong. And every European knows what he was already doing in Germany back then. And everybody in the crowd was like, these are the people whose grandparents survived the Blitz, who fought during D-Day, they were like,
Yeah, but Candace Owens, I don't know who Candace, I don't know where that child came from. I don't even watch why she even gets any brain or mouth time. Okay, because for Candace Owens, I gotta give her credit because she playing on all of y'all.
But I don't think she's making that much money, and this is where I'm a little surprised,
Yeah, but you know what? She will make money. Those are the types. That's why they do what they do. Any business that you're building, we all know that. It takes a while before you make money. Candace's only goal in life, and she knows if she comes say some crazy shit, and she a black woman,
something's gonna stick. Something's
gonna stick. Yeah. And everybody's walking around talking about Candace, and I've heard it before, and she is like, I don't even know. But why don't somebody take the child out of her misery?
But I don't understand.
But I gotta give her credit though. She's smart though. Candace is playing on that system.
But it doesn't show.
It's a career.
When she's confronted to European conservatives who believe culture is the highest form of you have to know, like in Europe, conservatives, when I got received by one of them one day to do a job, he wanted to write a book, philosophy about love.
Yes.
But not love as an object, not love as a relationship, love. And I was like, I couldn't understand what it meant, but whatever. It was like, he didn't care about the tradition, philosophy, and what people said in the past and how you build on it. But when I arrived, a domestic brought me to a door, opened the door. There were little croissants on the plate. I was at that time very hungry and poor, so I was. Then they came back. I was like this, and he sat down, and they know a lot of things. They just don't think about it. That's their thing. So they know, like, in quantum physics, they will tell you exactly what it is. They just don't think about it. They know it exists. They learn about it. So now they can talk about it. So when you have Candace Owens going to, and that happens to Steve Bannon as well. When they arrive to Europe with the far right Europeans, we're like, can you speak ancient Greek and German and French and Italian like we are supposed to? Oh, no. What are you, an American? This is what in America they're not telling. The far right Europeans believe white Americans are inferior genetically because they're all from the people we excluded, we expelled from Europe in the 14. They're the worst people possible. In Europe, we always say Americans are convicts and prostitutes. That's all. Like Australia. I know it's horrible, but that's what they say. And in Europe, that's, I was asked white. No, they're really brutal. They call them the white N-words.
Oh, so, I'm just done.
They don't know that. This is funny. Like, they think they're big shots in Europe. Nazis would have taken them to the ground and a bullet in the neck. Nazis were never victims. That's the thing. You look at Nazis, why they were so frightening. Unlike conservatives saying, "Oh, I'm being canceled." Nazis like, you deny me the right to talk. Huh. Done. They would shoot the person in front of you. They were terrifying because they were cold-blooded monsters. They smiled. They played with people in a refined manner. The only representation I saw of a Nazi officer that, to his point, is the colonel in Inglourious Basterds, the Nazi SS guy. I don't know if you saw that movie of Tarantino. He's played by the guy in Django Unchained, who's the dentist, doctor, shooter, the guy who at first is looking for Django. It's the same actor, and he arrives in a farm, and it's a Frenchman. And he says, I'd like to have a conversation with you in French. So they talk in French. He says, are you okay if we speak English a little bit? I haven't practiced my English. I heard you spoke English. So the French guy starts speaking English, and it says, you know why I'm here. In English says, you know that they're somewhere here, the Jews. They don't understand English, I figure. That's why you're okay with speaking English. So you will answer my questions and you will not talk. And he returns, they're here. They're under the ground. They're below us. And the poor guy's farmer knows his family's going to get slaughtered. So he says yes. So he brings in the Gestapo and they shoot through the ground. And everybody's dead. But they were like that. They could speak 5-6 languages. They had PhDs in philosophy and physics. And the big question that Europeans have that we never hear Americans have, because it's very European: how come the greatest civilization of Europe, Germany, in 2 centuries, gave us Beethoven, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Hegel, gave us art, gave us Salzburg, gave us the greatest musicians of the 2 past centuries, greatest philosophers, quantum physics, Einstein, could lead to this? And it's still a mystery. And there's been a lot of hypotheses like, well, that's what happens with modernity. When we look at progress, progress leads to destruction. The idea of progress, continuous progress, always progressing, means you want to improve humanity, improve meaning by force if necessary. So that's colonization. Nazis were just, think about it. The Germans were the only ones that were not allowed to colonize because they were too late to the party, if I may. So what did they do? They started colonizing Europe. But what the Nazis did to Europe is what Europeans did to Africa. Really, the same. We had camps. We slaughtered, we would cut the hands of people who would revolt. We did what Nazi shit. So, I'm just surprised at how ignorant people are about this period that was so important to understand, because I always say the civil rights movement could have never, as well as decolonization, happened without the Second World War. Because Second World War, first colonies fought and liberated the metropolis. So we were in debt, but then we said no, and then killed them, and there were revolutions and whatnot. In America, it's because a lot of Black veterans came back and were treated like shit. That's the civil rights movement, and also a new generation of white people who came back from the war and called the Nazis. And we're wondering, oh, the KKK are the same guys. Finally realizing that. But now that the World War II, the memory is fading, think about it. Racism comes back. And you know what? I don't want to get to a new war for people to learn the lesson again. If possible, that would be nice, because wars are not worth it. I mean, it's just...
Yeah, but we're not learning. We're not learning the right things. I feel like I say this every week, but the dumbing down of America has been a successful endeavor.
Not just America. Think about it. France had a very it's not a good education system because it replicates poverty and wealth, for very specific reasons, because it's so difficult, French school, from the start, that if you're rich and have a family that has tutors, it's easier, and books that they can. But when your parents don't speak French because they come from Algeria, and you're the only one speaking French, and you have 2 hours to go to school, and they can't buy a book because they just they buy food, they don't have big paying jobs. Yeah, so the French system is not fair. But one thing that's surprising in France is that the education level went really down over the past 20 years. We used to know the difference between a virus and bacteria. At 10 years old, 11 years old, we were able to do chemistry calculations. I was traumatized. I had panic attacks. I cried in front of exams. Every French person did, because our teachers would be, have you thought about becoming working manual jobs when you're 10? Really, teachers would be like that because your math exam was bad. I was like, okay. Then you would go to another person and be like, this is not what you're going to do with your life, right? You can't do maths. So do you know how to write?
Well, they did that here. They did it here to Black folk. Again, when my mother was growing up, they had the academic line for the white people and the commercial and trade line for the Black folks. And even some of the most brilliant kids in her school, the counselors told them that you are not going to go here. You're not going to do that. These are kids that weren't in the middle class, foo-foo type with the right zip code neighborhood. And they would say, well, no, you need to come over here. You'll be a hairdresser.
Or like that when we were in school.
Right. And an undertaker. So when I hear about all these doings from other places or the way people are steered, I'm like, here we go again. You're forgetting the black folk. You're forgetting the black folk. When you talk about Hitler, you're forgetting the black folk.
Yeah,
There was genocide.
I thought
when you're
remember
talking about
that's
other
in
I don't feel that. I don't feel that way.
but there's
well, no, but what I'm trying to say is that, and I can explain it better, is that none of the monstrous things that are happening, even we talk about education. My husband's from an island. To the day, if you don't have the fees for school and the uniform, the money for school, and they have a middle class there, you're not going to school. I'm not comparing us to anyone. I'm just saying that this is an old song. It's not a new song, and it's universal.
Rich.
It's all over the world. Let's get it straight. I'm not comparing the German Nazis to the plantations owners here. Let's make that clear. I'm not comparing anyone.
They're very similar.
Human suffering is human suffering. I'm just saying that none of this stuff is new in any part of the world because it's going on all over the world.
They never talk about something. What did the Nazis intend to do with Africa? It's strange that never, you know what they were intending to do? And this is, I know it's going to sound horrible. It's even worse than for the Jews. The Jews are genocided. Africans are re-enslaved. So the surprising thing of Nazis is that they want to kill everybody who's not white, but they still need black people to build shit. Even in their grand plan, their grand scheme, they would have colonized Africa and made it into a factory of slaves. That's their terms. So thank God they didn't do it. But,
well, I'm gonna get off the call. But what would this country look like right now if you didn't have Black folks playing that essential worker role?
A lot of skyscrapers wouldn't be standing. A lot of them.
A lot of food would not have gotten delivered. A lot of medical care would not have been delivered.
Yep.
A lot of Amazon deliveries would not have gone out.
Because of
you know, as you know, I suppose there has to always be somebody that can be trampled upon and you know, left with really no choice but to do the dirtiest, hardest, nastiest work that there is to be done. And that is a worldwide phenomenon.
I rewatched for the first time in maybe 20 years. I was a kid back then, so I didn't remember or understand a lot of scenes. I rewatched Malcolm X by Spike Lee the other day. And to your point, there's this scene where after he gets adopted, because, you know, they take away their from their mother, who after the murder of their so-called suicide, you know, from the back of his father, and he's at school, he's brilliant, and he's told by the teacher, it's a good job for, you know, an N-word. But I want to be a lawyer. Lawyer is not a career for an N-word. There's this scene. How about manual work? You're good with your hands. And you know, it's been there, and the movie's incredible because I didn't remember he was such a pimp at the beginning, like, you know, playing. And there's this sentence from I don't remember the guy who introduces him to the Nation of Islam. He tells, or is it Elijah Muhammad that says that, who says the most dangerous product of a society is the man who has nothing to lose.
And that's what I told you.
Him.
Yep. You know? Well, I told you it's the same way with the terrorists in the White House. It's exactly what I said. They will take one for the team. They have nothing to lose. They feel like their country is slipping away from them, and they'll take one for the team.
Yep.
Yeah. So, all right, you all, 2 weeks. Next week, we're on a break. And we have 3 weeks, March 10th, March 17th, March 24th.
By the way, technically by March 24th, surprisingly, the curve should be very down. It should be very low for the virus from the models I have. So
we met. I mean,
because
be here on March
vaccinations are ramping up. Here's the thing that nobody says: even if America does, it will improve because the rest of the world improves. You know what I mean? Because connections are doing. And by the way, there's a theory just before you leave. We suspect maybe coronavirus. The WHO has data they sent back from thanks to Chinese scientists. Incredible. It looks like it's possible it existed for 10 years in Cambodia.
I can believe
But
that.
nobody noticed it because it's a poor country. And for decades, Australians would go there to party and come back. But because Australians were getting so drunk and getting killed, the Australian government complained. So they started building big hotels with Chinese money. And they had a daily airline set up between Wuhan and Phnom Penh 5 years ago. And the idea would be that it was traveling in Cambodia and got onto a plane to Wuhan in the outskirts and started spreading from the outskirts and then hit Wuhan, because they're starting to think there's no intermediary animal. It's a human disease. From bat to human.
One of the things that I did find interesting in this chapter was the story about the Berlin Wall, when they brought down the wall, and the issue that it created for prostitutes. So she's still talking about HIV in this, right, in this section. And so the issue was that once they brought down the wall, all of these East German prostitutes started pouring into Berlin, selling ass for very cheap. And so Berlin prostitutes were upset. Because now you're bringing down prices in our market. See? And I was like, damn.
Check the bitch. Gang wars.
And you know what? Michelle, why? Why, Michelle? Why?
Because it's kind of not funny, but yeah, in a way, like, hey,
why,
bitch,
Michelle,
hey, bitch,
why?
hey, bitch, hey, you bitch, you bitch, bitch.
That's one of the implications of poverty.
Yeah, that the poor people will go after each other's throats. You're taking my business. Just an anecdote. I remember in France, when the European Union was finalized with Romania, we got all the homeless people from Romania coming in. And I remember the French homeless getting into scuffle fights with them, saying, this is my bench, this is my spot, and fighting, and like, these immigrants taking our spots. I'm like, you're homeless.
But Michelle, that right there, that was enough for me, girl. I'm done. I am too done. The economy is going to crap. When that happens, we are in serious trouble.
But you already see that with homeless people in New York. I see some homeless people being like, hey, you're not from the city. This is my spot. You're not from the country. You're from the suburb.
But Michelle's topped that. Michelle, what she said topped all this tonight.
Yeah, prostitutes fighting each other.
Yeah, that tops it all, girl. That just tops the East versus the West. Bringing down the price of the commodity. The price of the commodity is going down.
Another dramatic story in this part of the chapter that I had not thought about. I think this might have been Thailand she was talking about, where because AIDS was spreading among the prostitutes, they started importing younger girls, like 8, 9, 10 years old, so that they could say, this is a virgin, she's HIV free.
Yes.
Keep the money coming.
It's it.
You know. So I think Laurie's point is these are the kind of conundrums that impoverished people.
Yes.
Well, now the conundrum in Thailand is because of the pandemic, prostitutes can't make money anymore. And sex workers in Thailand, one woman or one man comes from the countryside. They make enough money to pay for their farmer family who's losing all their land due to climate change, for example, in Thailand. When I was a kid there, I remember being like, oh, but this is bad. They're exploiting people. I remember a guy telling me, you got to realize one thing. One girl brings back enough for her little sisters to never do that. This is why they do it. And I was like, wait, that's strange. And no, it's true around the world. And when they try to remove sex workers from their job, they always end up in convents, Catholic, like, oh, you're going to sue. And you're like, I'm not saying it's great or prostitution, but the thing is, it was the same thing in France. They wanted to help prostitutes out of the life, sex workers, and they offered them a $1,000 alimony. And one day, the sex worker said, okay, ma'am, from the government, I make 15,000 euros a quarter or a month that you tax. Yes, in France, prostitution is illegal, but it's taxed.
Right.
Brilliant. French. So the prostitute was like, I don't need your legalization. I don't need your charity.
Oh.
Like, I can make my own money. What I'm asking you is to be protected. So instead of making me illegal,
right,
make violence towards me illegal. And in the Middle Age, in the middle of Catholic Europe, prostitutes had special collars on them. They were prostitutes. You know why? To warn people not to hurt them or to do anything, because people who would hurt a prostitute in Paris, they had different rules. Milan, in the Middle Age, they were all franchises. In Paris, raping a prostitute, they would remove your testicles. In Milan, they would cut your arms because prostitutes were considered essential to punishment.
That's what I'm saying.
They were considered essential to the balance of society. We need prostitutes. We need them. They need to be protected. And they had their quarter and they had everything. And you still have this in Amsterdam. They have a union. They have health services. The government has their back. Like, yeah, sure. Oh, you want out of the life? We have a new plan if you want to. But if you don't want out of the life, we have another plan. That's what the government should do.
And they're
unionized.
Kind of system going on too in Germany.
Unionized.
When I was there, in 2019,
they go on strike. They went on strike once.
My brother-in-law showed me where they have like this series of trailers out in the woods, and they're for prostitutes. So you keep them off the main streets. Everybody knows, it's structured. You know how the Germans are.
Nine, no blow job after 8 p.m. 9. This is not the rule. Blow job after 8, 9.
You guys are like too much. If I was 30 years younger, I wouldn't even live in the United States of America. I know where I would be, where I get health care, plenty of money, protection. There's no reason for me to go get a college education, all that business bullshit. If I knew what I do today, I might be in France or...
Nah, not France, but funny story that I thought incredible is in the Netherlands, people who are handicapped, disabled, who are ending their lives, who are getting to the end, they're like, they deserve sex. Health insurance there reimburses prostitutes. They're not called prostitutes, but they're called something be a therapist. They're sent to people who are paralyzed to give them love.
I heard about that. I did hear about that.
It's reimbursed. It's prescribed by a doctor. You need love. I haven't touched a woman in 5 years because I can find, and they're specialists. They're not.
Yes, I heard that.
They don't do blowjobs. They do them if you want to, but their thing is, oh, you're paralyzed. I studied pleasure in paralyzed people. There's a way. And
yes.
And I saw a show about that, and nobody's ashamed. Doctors say, love is part of decent life, and most people are not let's be honest, they can't meet new women or new men. Elderly ladies about to die, they get a beautiful stripper coming in and hi. Hey,
that's what I'm talking about.
It's crazy, but I love it.
No, that is exactly what I'm talking about. It's called end of life care. End of life care. That's what that's called.
It's so great.
Wow.
But here's the thing. I had a friend who, when he was 13, was lynched in the north of France for being gay with bike chains and stuff.
Deal with that.
So his family, they beat up the guys, they went back, but they said, you can't stay here. They're coming back for you. Nobody cares about you. Unfortunately, we're here. But so they gave him money and said, go to the Netherlands, where gay people are tolerated. So you may have a life. We'll give you money, but you can't stay here. So he went and he made his life. And I told him, so yeah, there are more tolerant. I said, no. I said, here's the thing. If I kiss my boyfriend who's white, he's white, there's no problem. In the middle of the street, in the middle of school, nobody will say anything. If I enter a gay bar in Amsterdam holding the hand of a black man, people will look. They're not tolerant. So that's the thing. You have societies that are ultra tolerant, apparently still racist. Homosexuals, okay, between white people.
Right.
So it's this is the thing that never stops. It's racism and sexism. Those are two things that never stop.
Yeah.
So yeah, be careful. Germany can be very racist too.
Anti-blackness. I was listening to another Michael Moore. I like Michael Moore. Michael Moore podcast. And this one, he was interviewing Charles Blow, you know, who has a new book out.
Yeah.
And so Charles Blow was talking, his book apparently is a plan to help Black people develop more political power on the lines of what we saw in Georgia recently. And so, you know, he's really promoting a remigration of Black people back to certain southern states. And so he was really breaking down, you know, we keep hearing about how the country is going to be a minority by 2042 or whatever. But he was really breaking down what that looks like. It's certainly not all Black people, you know, and certain states are going to be predominantly Hispanic, certain states are going to be predominantly Asian, certain states are going to be predominantly Hawaiian, but there's not really any state positioned right now to be predominantly Black unless we make a concerted effort to make it so. You know,
I'm just thinking about people in West Virginia. We chose West Virginia, all Black people in West Virginia, West Virginians, because you know they are. It's West Virginia. Yeah, us. You're close to Washington D.C.
Yeah. So he's not calling on old heads like us, Venita.
But you should do it.
You know, looking at young people that are starting out and, you know, what they might want to really consider doing as a strategy.
The reason
why it made a lot of sense.
Yeah, but it makes a lot of sense. But don't forget, you're going to states that, you know, are hostile to you. You know, people don't believe it, but you still have stories of guy living in the city. They're the only Black guy around, and they get an N-word tagged to their house. And the sheriff said, "Oh, it's probably a bunch of kids."
But you know, but I mean, we have racism and hostility, you know, right here in New York,
Upstate,
right here
in New York City, yes.
You know, and so really, what I think Blow is trying to suggest, like what we just saw, the election of a Jew and a Black man from Georgia to the U.S. Senate. Only happened because the demographics have shifted so dramatically in the last 20 years in Georgia.
But there's also Stacey Abrams, who did a big job of simply getting people registered to vote.
He's giving Stacey Abrams all her due credit, but he's also making the point that there wouldn't have been all those people for Stacey Abrams to organize if masses of young Black people had not descended on Georgia in the last 20 years.
Atlanta, yeah, you're right. Atlanta grew up exponentially, and it's all Black-owned businesses, except for CNN, but they were already there. What I'm saying is, yeah, you're right. In South Carolina, there's also the link between like Charleston and Atlanta. This whole road, Boeing got there. A lot of factories got there. So, I mean, the problem with, you know, what worries me is that everybody talks about demographic shift. Demographic shift only changes the balance of power in a true democracy. Think about South Africa. the apartheid is gone, but who owns the wealth? Who still owns it? Yeah, they're no longer politically at the top. Who cares? They've got the land. White people.
Yeah.
And they're an ultra minority in South Africa to this day. So I'm telling people to be careful with hope about that, because clearly the structure of power is meant to survive in a certain way. And I think,
well, he's looking at both political power and economic power. And he also offers some statistics on concentrated poverty and what it looks like in various states. And so he's saying someplace like, it might be a comparison of New York to Mississippi, and that even though Mississippi may be the poorest state overall, the poverty is not as concentrated as it is in a place like New York. And so those kinds of differences. And so there are different economic possibilities when you are congregated enough to pool your meager resources and get some things done. And so he's saying, I think he said half the middle class Blacks in the country are concentrated right there in these. He named 7 different southern
people. Yeah, it reminds me of that character in South Park. In South Park they only have one Black kid, and his name is Token, and he's super rich. He's the richest kid in the city, and of course the whole show turns around how he doesn't want to get mingled with all that nonsense that these kids are going through. And there's one moment that's incredible, is that the episode is the father of one of the characters goes to the Wheel of Fortune, and the word is N, no letter, GGERs, people who annoy you. That's the clue. And he's like, Mr. Marsh, 30 seconds. And everybody's like, he's like, I can't say it. You got to say it. You're going to lose the money. And he says the N word with a lot of enthusiasm, and they turn it's naggers. Naggers. So, of course, he becomes the N guy. And the whole show is about him and his son trying to say to this Black kid and his family, we understand. We're going to apologize. And they get angry and angry. And at the end of the episode, finally, it comes to the mind of a kid, goes to Token and says, Token, I don't understand. Yeah, I know. That's why I don't want to talk to you. No, you don't understand. I do not understand what you're going through. And this is the conclusion, which is, you don't. As a white man, you can imagine it, and that's dangerous. The imagination of racism in white people, because it gives the movie Mississippi Burning, where Black people are like secondary in the background, and it's all white people fighting each other. Like, but where are the main characters of the movie? Not that I have, but the fantasy of racism, like the fantasy of rape, which is rape is always violent in a back alley. No, that's the minority of rapes. Most rapes are in the close vicinity of the victim. That's why it's so difficult to report it. Well, same thing for racism. I always the thing about racism, Americans and Europeans don't understand. It's again the Nazi thing. It's not hatred. That's the end. It starts with them, me, them. I have individuality. They're a group. They're a hive. And Jews were seen like that. Black people are seen like that. Asian people are seen like that. Always as a flock of people who have interchangeable minds. It seems. It's like I don't remember in which interview somebody asked somebody, what do Black people think about that? The guy was like, I'm not the king of Black people. I don't know what other people think. Like the guy was like, what do you think? I'm a representative for all Black people.
It's if it shows up a lot in all kinds of isms. I mean, to say all men are this, or all women are that, is the same kind of thinking. And I think that
doesn't lead to the same consequences.
It's difficult for people to understand that you have to look at people as individuals. Like again, Charles Blow said something interesting. He was talking about his experience at the New York Times, and and their idea of diversity being you hire people with, some color to their skin, and you satisfied your diversity agenda. But those people with color on their skin have gone to the same elite schools that you went to.
Yes.
They summer in the same locations that you do. They still have, all of those kind of markers. And he said, but, for me, I grew up poor. I'm like the only Southerner that you have on staff. I went to Howard University. All of those are aspects of what makes me me, not just the color of my skin. And so I think all of the isms come down to, in some way, of us not understanding that we're complex beings. We really are. And our color, our skin is really just one characteristic in a long, long list of what makes us. But it is that complexity that I think is difficult for people. And so the shorthand just becomes all white people are this, all Black people are this, all women are that, all men are this.
Usually, that's
we miss the forest for the trees.
Well, I'm a little violent when people do that. Like guys say, "Oh, women are only interested by money." I'm like, of course they are. They need they're females like we're males. In nature, a female cannot be with a male who's inferior. What do you mean? Well, if you can't do money and take care of your children, what good are you? People look at me when I say that like they're right. Women should be severe towards us. They need to make us grow up.
Oh,
so they hate when I say that. And when white people complain about the minorities, I'm like, why? Why are you complaining about that? Well, you heard about black on black crime. Yeah, I heard about white on white crime. We've slaughtered 800,000 of our own last year per the FBI. Look at the statistics. We kill more people between each other than Black people kill us. We're the main threat to ourselves. If you use that thinking of Black on Black, then white on white crime is worse.
What did you say last week? There were 450 wars in Europe?
450 wars in 4 centuries, barely 4 centuries. It's like in Europe, we're like, yeah, learning about wars in Europe is the worst part when you're at school. So 1515 Marignan, the Swiss fall down the French army, but the French army retrieves. That's when the famous quote, oh, this, he said that. And then you go to, okay, then there's 1517, then there's 1518, but actually that's the war of 1492, restarting after a break of 10 years. It's insane. Like just between 1789 1792, the first battle of the French Revolution against a foreign power, the Valmy battle, where Goethe said this is the first historical day of history. By that, he meant this is the first day we witness something we will call history, because now we have consciousness, but whatever, it's good. But from there on to Napoleon, there were Belgium, Great Britain, Germany, the Benelux, Italy, the campaign of Italy, the campaign of Egypt, the campaign of Spain, where we slaughter a lot of priests, campaign of Russia, campaign of and plus that's 15 campaigns approximately in 15 years just from the French. The Germans were actually very peaceful because surprisingly the only time they were really at war were during the Crusades, and they were at war against the Pope, which is like, oh, pretty cool. But
I'm just so over it.
The Italian wars. I mean, but we learned some cool stuff in these wars, surprisingly, when we're kids, because we learned how there were incredible personalities. Like in Europe, there was this woman, not a Borgia, who was she met the Borgias, the family of the Pope, had kidnapped her son, tortured the son in front of her castle in the broad daylight, and said, we're going to cut his balls and cut his throat in front of you in the name of the Pope. She came out, opened her dress, showed her vagina to the troops, said, this will get another son more stronger, this will make other sons. And she went back, and the guys were like, oh, she's badass. So they didn't kill the son because we don't have leverage. But they were badasses. back then, you know, and you're this is an incredible story. Going to the walls and saying, I'll make more, come, bring it on, bring your troops inside, try to find me. Joan of Arc, who was incredible. But there's one funny story. You know how the Italian wars against France were stopped, how they won? They couldn't win against us. We were very brutal. There's a funny story. We always reminded people, we learned war with the English. 140 years of war with the English. We had cannons that could shoot, that were linked to a chain. That was our invention. So when they were shoot, they were doing this and decapitating people instead of going through the crowd, which missed too many people. So we were very brutal, very violent. We were crushing each city. We actually genocided Lucca, the 7,000 inhabitants, because they wanted to negotiate their surrender. The king said, no, negotiate, kill everybody. I don't have time for that. When they arrived in Naples, because they were claiming the crown of Naples, the king opened the doors and discovered the entire aristocratic family dead at the table. They had the plague. The Borgias had contaminated the noble family of Naples that the king needed to marry with the plague, then had killed them at their table so that when the king would open, he would discover at his horror that not only was the entire family slaughtered, but they were contaminated. So the city was plagued. The king died of the plague. His troops were slaughtered by the plague, and the Italians repelled the French.
Rick, I'm gonna have nightmares tonight, Rick. Thank you so much for the nightmares. I really appreciate it.
That's what they call the superior civilization. But now I know, for example, if Trump supporters want a civil war, I got plenty of ideas of how you conquer an enemy.
Oh my God, Rick, may the force be with you. I'm leaving the lights on now. I have to leave my lights on now. Thanks to you, Rick. I appreciate it. The horrors.
Don't worry. Think about great things like they might find life on Mars. Well, who cares?
I love
not
you,
really
Rick.
great news, right?
Have a good night.
Have a good night, everybody.
Love you. Good night.
See you in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Sweet dreams.